Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to another episode of the Weekend Crusaders. My name's Sean Wasserkrug. With me, as always, is Brian Michaels. We're here to talk about 5 more movies that have come out during the week of October 15th through the 17th. Episode 40. We're at 40 episodes. We got, about 10, 12 more to go for the end of the year?
Well, it's 52 weeks in a year, so yeah.
Well, no, but we're not doing. We skipped.
We skipped a week, so
we're gonna have like the week, like end of the year episode and stuff like that.
Oh,
so we
yeah,
probably
plenty of stuff to do. We got plenty more to go. Yeah,
exactly. But this is this is a very weird week, I would say. I think Brian and I both said before this episode started, like on paper, this week looked pretty exciting. Then we went back and rewatched them, and we're like, this is gonna be a unique episode to say the least. We're still obviously on the horror tropes. That's not going to go away anytime soon because it's October and we're in the middle of it now. So we've got some more horror films, and next week's going to have horror films again. But these, I think, at least for Brian, a horror movie that he really, really loves. I've got 2 horror movies that I really, really love. But we're going to start with this divisive one first because I love this horror film, and Brian literally told me to go fuck myself and that he hates me because I made him watch this again. So we're starting with my pick. My pick is the 2009 phenomenon, because it was Paranormal Activity. Paranormal Activity came out October 16th, 2009, even though technically it came out in 2007. Had a budget of $15,000, had a weekend opening, wide release weekend opening of $19.61 million. It had previously made $13.55 million in limited releases. It was number 3 its opening weekend and was number 1 on its second week. Had a finished box office of $193.35 million, $107.91 million domestic, and $85.43 million international. Now, part of me wants to immediately talk about why I love this film and explain how revolutionary it was, but Brian's going to go so cutthroat that I almost kind of want Brian to get his shit out of the way first. So, Brian, gloves are off. I'm sure you're going to offend me and a lot of people who actually enjoy this franchise. So, go ahead, get it all out before I start talking about it.
Well, anybody who enjoyed this doesn't have a brain, so 2 weeks in a row. Let's go. No, so Paranormal Activity. There's definitely a place for low budget horror. I mean, some of the best horror movies are low budget. I mean, things like came out. I don't think it's one of the best, but like Blair Witch Project. Same kind of found footage idea. Super low budget, done with handheld cameras, things like that. But it, at least evoked some kind of horror to it. Even although revisiting it, it's not as good as when I first saw it. So this one comes along.
When it comes to Blair Witch, I can agree with that.
So this one comes along, clearly super uber low budget. It almost seems like something that some friends just filmed for fun or for a school project or whatever it was, but somehow it got a theatrical release. Because this movie, it's a horror movie, but it forgot to actually be scary, like at all. I mean, the entire movie is essentially watching this couple sit around their house and talk. And then every once in a while, a door closed. Or, oh, listen, wait, now some crew members are knocking on the door or knocking on the walls, making noises. That's like the extent of the horror. That's it. Nothing scary. There's not a single scary moment in this entire movie. It's basically just boring from beginning to end. And hey, if a door shutting by itself is enough to scare you, more power to you. You will love this movie and you will piss your pants. But if it takes anything more than that to scare you, don't even bother watching this. The worst part is, since you want me to get it all off my chest.
Go ahead. I was going to say, it's like, are you done? Is that it?
People went and saw this and gave it money, so they made 6 more of these and counting, because apparently there's another one being made.
Yeah, it was like a Paramount Plus one.
Now, granted, they from what I can tell, the both audience scores and the box office went down pretty fast because people realized they aren't that good. But still, the fact that people paid for this first one, I don't know. I'm glad you said the 2009 phenomenon and not 2009 horror movie, because it's not a horror movie. And but it is a phenomenon because people were strange. You can go now.
First off, It was an independent film project done by these guys. It was
Great.
never
More
meant.
power to them.
It was I let you get all your stuff out. Let me get my stuff out. It was never meant for theatrical release. It went to film festivals and it was overwhelmingly loved by Steven Spielberg, who came to them and said, "You guys need to make this a feature-length film. You need to make this a bigger thing." Spielberg is the one who made this as big as it was, and the reason why it was a phenomenon. And and I love that the tables have finally turned, because Brian's usually the one that pulls up like this history of films and stuff like that. So I'm gonna drop it. Back in like 2007, 2008, 2009, this thing, you had to go online and as a college request this film to get released in your area. Like, you had to log on to their website, put in your college information so you could try to get this film set to your university for a screening. That is how the buzz for this film, the marketing for this film was masterful, because they sold this film as this incredibly scary film, which was a project, like I said, 15 grand, literally nothing in terms of movies nowadays, and made the supply and demand of it so huge that when they finally did release it in theaters, the masses came and saw this thing. The reason why I love this film, I don't know why I went into debate mode, because my tone totally just switched into debate mode, and I apologize for that. The reason why I love this film, for $15,000, I feel like and Brian, yes, for you, it didn't do anything for you. I get that. You're a hard person to please, especially when it comes to horror. And normally I am too. They managed to do so much with so little. Yes, they might have just knocked on some doors and did this and this and this, but they did enough to create this atmosphere and this supply and demand off of 15 grand. Yes, there's some swinging doors, and there's some noises and some stuff like that. But the ambiance of this film is what sells this. And a lot of people might argue, the acting shit, the horrific acting is bad. Yes, it is. But that's what makes it feel more realistic. The character of Mika is hands down one of the worst acted characters and one of the worst characters in horror film history. He does literally everything you could possibly do wrong in a horror film to the 10th degree. But think about a real life person, which this is found footage, so it's supposed to feel like it's a real life thing. If you went and had freaking Robert De Niro out here acting this, it wouldn't feel as real. You have a douchebag character who literally, he's never done anything outside of the paranormal films. So you have someone who literally feels like a real person in these things, doing stupid shit, trying to act all macho douchebaggy because he's the man and he has to defend his house, which makes the element of this feel more realistic. Same thing with Katie, which she's gone on to do other things now. But that is why, just like the Blair Witch kids, you've got 3 kids who had never done any other acting for the most part, which made the element of it feel more realistic and felt more real, because their performances were not great, but they felt more real than you having like a Leonardo DiCaprio or any of them do it, because they didn't feel like they were acting. They felt like they were reacting to real life scenarios, which is where the Paranormal Activity stuff really sinks in. And for 15 grand, they do that immensely. The Ouija board scene is fantastically well done. When she gets pulled out of the bed, she took that hard. Like, I commend Katie. She took that hard. Good for her on that scene. But the great thing about it, and to me, horror is not about scaring, because I don't get scared watching horror films. The real thing is, did it grasp my attention? And whenever the lights went out and you see night, whatever, and you're waiting, everyone gets on the edge of their seats and is scanning the room, trying to figure out where it's coming from, what's about to happen next. That is what makes a horror film great. Because literally, as soon as the lights go down and they go to sleep, everyone shuts up and they all just get on the edge of their seats and they start watching. That is what you need to make a franchise great. They spawned 6 films. Well, 5, not counting this one, off of that. Yes, do they progressively get bad as it goes forward? I honestly don't think the other ones are that bad. They just don't have the magic of the first time. I think the second one's actually better than the first one, which the second one is technically a prequel of this, because it's the events of the second one that lead to this film. But I love what they did with this. The acting is atrociously bad, but that to me makes it feel better and makes it feel more unique and real. And even the stunts that they do in this film on a 15 grand budget, I think looks and does great. The whole powder footstep scene, I think works great. The only thing that is wrong with this film that ruins it for me is what Spielberg did, which is the last half second, that last half second of the film. I remember watching this for the first time going, this is fucking great. Like what they're doing with the budget and everything, like they're doing so much with so little. And the crowd, because I was watching it in a sold out theater, they have the whole theater in the palm of their hands for this movie. And they're doing barely anything at all, but they're selling it so profusely till that last fucking half second where her face changed. Because the whole thing up to this point was practical, and they weren't using anything like CG or green screen or anything crap like that. Everything felt realistic and practical. And then they had to change her face. And that was a Spielberg decision. And yes, I granted it did. It's a reason why they did that, is to spawn it off into sequels. The original ending is beautifully well done. The alternate ending is also incredibly well done. And if you guys have ever seen this and you have not seen the original ending, that's the best ending. But you can't have the sequels with Katie with the original ending. The alternate ending is also incredibly well done, and I think makes the story of the first film that much better. The story that you get in the theatrical film, I'm not a fan of, but it literally lets you go further down the rabbit hole of the story. The original, because like I said, these kids, they weren't trying to make a franchise. They just wanted to make a scary horror film. And for the masses, it works. And I have gone back and rewatched this film at least 5-6 times. And I commend what they did with the budget that they had. Because it's an independent film. They weren't expecting to do this big lavish franchise with it. And I think for what they did a great job. And a lot of people want to come out of the woodwork now, like you right now, and want to slap it down and say it's garbage and all this crap. At the time, this was great, just like Blair Witch was back in. I
thought the same thing at the time.
What?
I thought the same thing at the time it released too.
I respected what they did.
I know, but you're acting like we're coming out of the woodwork now, or like we're trying to slap it
down
later. It's like, no, I always thought this.
They've been like this ever since the sequels and everything has happened. I've always been a defender of the series. I have not necessarily been a fan of. I like the second one. Third one I wasn't a fan of. Marked ones where they went literally to like L.A. It's actually not a bad film, but it's unnecessary. And even Marked ones, the final one they did before this new one comes out, honestly, not that bad. But at that point, this story was not built to have the legs of a franchise, because then they had to go more into witchcraft, mythology, all that kind of crap. This first one, and to me also the second one, is a perfect pocket of what they were trying to do. And then the third one, they tried to add like the Xbox Connect and all that crap, or the fourth one, and it just was stupid. But I think the franchise as a whole really gets shit on way more harshly than it deserves to be. And that's why I like Paranormal Activity. I get it's not your cup of tea. And granted, you've picked movies that are not my cup of tea that you think is really, really good, and I think they're shit. This is something that I appreciate the artistic ranges that these guys went with the budget that they had. That they basically turned this into a huge supply and demand marketing scheme with college universities. Because I was one of those guys logging on to the website trying to get Paranormal Activity to come to the University of Nebraska, Omaha, so I could watch this movie. And this was one of the first films, independent-wise, that I was focused on this thing like a hawk, watching how this thing was growing and everything like that, and watching the theater react to it on top of watching the film myself. There's a special place in my heart for Paranormal Activity. I get it's not your cup of tea, but to me, this was a special horror film for me.
Clearly, because do I get to talk now? Okay, cool.
Yeah. Wow. Okay.
Well, I talked for like a minute, and then you went
talking
for a
about
7-minute rant.
Hey, I said I wanted to get everything out, but I knew you have your hate stuff, so I wanted you to get your hate stuff.
No, I'm not going to try and debate this whole thing with you, because we're not really here to debate. I do want to. I will just address a couple of things you said. One, when it got to the nighttime, I agree. Everybody was kind of like, wait, let's scan the room and see what's going to happen. Because you're like, what am I supposed to be seeing? I'm saying, like, what am I supposed to be seeing? There's nothing happening. Okay, the door moved. Is that it? Was that what I was supposed to be scared of? The door moving?
Play it with subtitles. You can. It helps you focus on where to look. It really does.
But I was like, is that all I'm supposed to be seeing? Is that happen? Oh, okay, whatever. So I mean, there's that. But I also agree that it was good that they used these non-actors in there, because I think when you use a found footage movie and put recognizable actors in it, it does take away from it because it doesn't have that real feel to it.
Yeah.
Like when Blair Witch came out, they actually tried to advertise it, and a lot of people believed that this was real found footage. They didn't know it was an acted thing.
And I think if Paranormal had came out then, they probably would have thought the same thing. But
right, but by then it had been done a few times.
People are smarter now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or
and you know what they did on their budget creating their film. I agree. What gets me is I just don't understand. I'm baffled by the success of it being this widespread thing, and that's where what you're right about. The one thing you're absolutely right about is it was a marketing success, because what they did is they created demand that wasn't there. They basically said, we have this movie, and if you want to see it, you have to demand a few things. So people unseen, they don't know anything about like, I got to see this movie. We have to demand it to get to come to our town, even though they don't know anything about it. They don't know if they're going to like it. So they have these people basically getting the demand, creating the demand for a movie that otherwise wasn't there, so that they will show the movie there, and then it grows from there. So from a marketing standpoint, absolutely give them props for that as well. I'm just saying, I don't find it one bit scary. If you do, more power to you.
Cloverfield was another one of those movies that did a phenomenal marketing scheme. Dropped the trailer a week before it came out, and Cloverfield also one of my favorites. But yeah, it's like I said, I know it's not your cup of tea. I knew you having to go back and rewatch it. I was going to tell you, you know what, Brian, you don't have to rewatch it, but I knew you were going to. But
you know what? But I don't think I'd ever watched it since the first time. So I'm like, you know what? I'll give it another chance, because I mean, there are times when I've watched a movie like in the wrong mood for it or something, and I don't like it, and I go back later and watch it. I'm like, I really like this movie now, or vice versa. I might like a movie, go back and watch it, be like, it sucks. But this one didn't change it.
I wasn't expecting it to. I really wasn't. Anything else you want to
add? No, although it is not available for free to watch anywhere.
No, but once again, just like everything else, it's horror. I'm pretty sure because of the Paramount Plus one coming out, I'm sure if you guys have Paramount Plus, they're probably all on there.
Oh, is that where the new one's coming?
Yeah, it's going to Paramount Plus. So I'm expecting if you guys have that, you can probably find all the paranormals on that thing, because I would find it very hard to believe they would have the new movie go there and not have the other ones there as well. But you may get lucky and find it on TV because of it being the Halloween season. I said holiday season. That's not right. But anyway, we're moving on now to Brian's pick. Brian's pick is a comedy from the late 2000s. I have not seen it since it came out, so this was it felt like first time watch. It's one of those movies where it's like, I know I've seen it, but as I was watching, I was like, I don't remember like any of this. So it felt like a first time watch for me, even though I know I had seen it previously. We are talking about the sex comedy Sex Drive. Sex Drive came out October 17th, 2018, had a budget of $19 million, had a weekend opening of $3.6 million. It was number 9 its opening weekend, had a finished box office of $18.75 million, $8.4 million domestic, and $10.35 million international. Brian, this is your pick, so have at it.
Yeah, Sex Drive is one of those movies that I didn't know anything about really going into. You don't get these kind of movies a lot anymore. I mean, there was kind of the, obviously back in the 80s, you had the Porky's and all that kind of thing, and then it kind of died off for a while. And then American Pie obviously brought it back in a big way, and there's then its own sequels and a million American Pie knockoffs after that. And then again, it fades
and all that.
Yeah, and then again, it kind of fades away after a while, just because people get kind of sick of it. And also, there's always these waves of backlash of like, oh, you can have sex comedy. Oh, this is not PC. Oh, now we want sex comedies. No, it's not PC. This one might have come out at the wrong time because it didn't make a lot of money. It wasn't super well received. I think because people nowadays just get offended way too easily. But I mean, it's a sex comedy. What do you want? It's not going to be, let's respect everyone. But this is the only recognizable names in this really are all supporting roles. Yeah, James Marsden shows up in a hilarious role, I might add. You got Seth Green shows up as an Amish dude. He's great in it. Katrina Bowden, some of you might recognize from like blanked out TV show 30 Rock. She was on. But otherwise, I mean, the main cast at the time was nobody. Now Clark Duke, Amanda Crew. What's that?
I was like, Clark Duke was, I would say, a name.
He wasn't a
name. Hot Tub Time Machine and The Office, and
I think this is one of his first things, though. I think when this came out.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know. Amanda Crew, who most people probably still don't recognize, that maybe from Silicon Valley. If you watch that, this is the first place I saw her. I find her completely adorable, so I liked her in this a lot. But I mean, it is a sex comedy. You know what you know. You know what you're getting into going into it, and it delivers. I mean, it's a lot of really jokes that are going to offend some people. It's a lot of not PC humor. But if you like that kind of thing, if you like raunchy humor, which I do, then you're going to have a good time watching this. Now, you said you'd seen this before, or you had not?
I saw it when it came out, and I hadn't seen it till since then. So rewatching it now, I was more. It felt like a first time watch because I vaguely remembered barely any of it. So when like certain things happen, I was like, "How does this end again? Who ends up with who?" And like obviously, I remembered Seth Green's Amish character, and I remember James Marsden's character, and I remember the donut suit. But outside of that, I barely remembered the movie, so it felt like a first time watch for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, go ahead.
I was just saying, but for me, I still enjoyed it as much as the first time I watched it. And actually, I ended up watching after this. There's an unrated cut, which the director is just having all kinds of fun with. There's literally just random shots of boobs and stuff just shoved in the movie for no reason.
Not just boobs.
And there's even like their commentary and stuff. It's really fun for a director's cut. It's like not taken seriously, just them having fun with it, and I love it. But as far as the film itself, for me, easily the standouts, like I already said, were James Marsden and Seth Green. James Marsden is a guy who has never really gotten to be the lead in anything big. I mean, he's had the lead in a couple like small roles, like he does in the Nicholas Sparks romance, and
he's the ultimate supporting cast.
But he's always like the boyfriend that's going to get jilted so that the two main stars can get together, or he's like somebody's brother or something like that. And here he's that as well. He's basically the older brother of the main character, but he gets to have so much fun in this show. He gets to finally sink his teeth into it and just be over the top goofy. And I really enjoyed him in this. And I actually wish he would get more good roles.
Well, I mean, he was Cyclops. So, and he isn't Sonic, but I mean, he is second fiddle to obviously Sonic.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Marsden's the ultimate number two. Like either he gets the occasional like lead, like in 27 Dresses, where he's the romantic lead. But yeah, he's usually the boyfriend who's going to get screwed over by the eventual love interest, or he's just like even Cyclops. Like Cyclops got screwed over in the X-Men franchise because I mean he's always second fiddle to Wolverine. But yeah, Marsden is, to me, he's the ultimate team player. Like, if you want a consistent team player who's going to come in, do his job, and look good doing it, you get Marsden for that role. Does he deserve probably more than that? Absolutely. Will he? Maybe down the road. But right now, yeah, he's one of the best number twos in terms of films. So going back and rewatching this, like I said, it felt like a first time watch because I couldn't remember if I liked it, loved it, or was just kind of with it. And I think the main problem with Sex Drive, and you kind of touched on it, I think this came out at the end of the sex comedy phase. So when it finally did come out, I think everyone was just kind of over the sex comedy stuff. Not to the point that they were like it is now where they can't make these jokes because it's not PC, because right now we're in a world of eggshell walking. But 2008, that wasn't that time. I just think that it was at that end of phase where the sex comedies were kind of dying out.
Yeah, like all the jokes had been done.
Exactly. So it wasn't, and even with this, I mean, if you watch Eurotrip, this is basically Eurotrip for the most part, except that they're not going, to another country. They're going on a road trip, which once again, we had Road Trip for that. So a lot of it.
I think personally, this is funny in Road Trip or Euro Trip.
I like Road Trip way better personally. I like the cast for Road Trip way better. And to me, that's literally kind of where this movie, I don't want to say it fails, but to me, this is definitely a better second half film than it is a first half. Because the first half of this film does not work. The introduction of the characters outside of James Marsden, who's, like I said, funny in his role, him beating up the garage door is probably one of the highlights of the film for me. When he tries to drop kick it and misses, that's a great scene. But like the main character, Ian, played by Josh Zuckerman, this character is annoying. He's you're
He's
supposed
the
to,
neurotic kid. He's really no different than Jason Biggs in American Pie. Let's be honest.
but Biggs had like the rest of the crew with him to elevate Jason Biggs's character. Clark Duke does not do a good job of establishing Zuckerman's character to make him likable. He's a whiny, squealy, like, virgin boy, basically. And you're supposed to root for him, but you really kind of don't give a shit about him. You like Clark Duke's basically ugly version of Stifler, because Clark Duke's not an attractive kid.
That's what I don't get most of anything in this movie. Clark Duke's playing this character who's like this total ladies' man. Like every girl he talks about sleeping with, I'm like, I don't.
Yeah, he's Stifler without any good looks. Like, at least with Stifler,
Stifler was like a jock, though.
Yeah, you're like, it's Sean William Scott.
Like
Clark
this
Duke
is some dorky, chubby guy, and it's like
no, because he's playing off the ploy, and it's not necessarily a ploy because there is some truth to it that if you treat a girl like shit, then you can get any girl you want, which good for you. But it doesn't make his character likable by any means. And how do you make his character likable? You get him to stop doing that, which he does halfway through the film, and then you actually give a crap about Clark Duke's character. Amanda Crew, she's great. I have no problem with Amanda. I agree. I wish I would see her in more things. I actually really enjoy her character. But the problem is that for the first half of the film, it's basically Ian and Clark Duke basically doing their shtick, and it's not really hitting because you don't have any reason to like Clark Duke's character. You really have no reason to like Ian. Then you have Amanda Crews show up, and you kind of just feel bad for her because she has a crush on Clark Duke's character for no reason. And then you have Ian, who's basically being I'm using the sexual term, he's a cuck, trying to get her to really kind of go with him. And it's like, there's no reason for her to go with you, dude. You're just kind of this waste of space of a character. Now, halfway through the film, once Seth Green shows up, and we get to the Amish party with Fallout Boy, which was just a weird throw in. I didn't hate it, but it was just a weird throw in. And you get them to go to the county fair with the abstinence club thing, which that part was funny. That's when the characters started to grow on me, and I started to enjoy their characters, and it started to actually be funny and enjoyable. But that first half was rough to get through, which for most people, they'll stop watching the movie at that point. Me, obviously, we're watching it for the show, so I grew to enjoy those characters halfway through. So when we get to the inevitable third act for what's going on, yes, you actually do start to care about the three main leads. It's just that first half to me just does not work because it does feel a lot like Eurotrip. But to me, Eurotrip did a better job establishing their group core characters better than Sex Drive does. But by the end of the film, it's fine. It's fine. It's one of those films that you kind of just have to stick it out and to make it to the end because it's once you get to the end, it's solid, but you just have to make it through the first 20, 30 minutes.
I didn't mind the opening, but that's just me.
Well, yeah, it was your pick, of course. I mean, great.
This one of those weeks where there wasn't anything. Well, except if we hadn't made it our feature, that probably would be my pick.
Well, yeah,
this is a movie I really liked, but it was also another one of those weeks where it was like nothing's really jumping out at me. So how about this one?
Yeah, it wasn't. I kind of wish. It's not that I wanted more Seth Green. His character was so one note with what his character was about that I was like, can you give me a little more, Seth?
Well, because he's supposed to basically show up for one scene. I think they brought him back for a second one later on. But that's all a one scene character needs to be.
But it's Seth Green. Seth Green needs more. He really does. You don't drop Seth Green in one of these movies and you just give him those two scenes. Well, I mean, it's actually a few scenes because they go in and out with his character. But and once again, the girl that Clark Duke ends up with. Really? Come on, give me a break. But anyway, talking about comedians getting with incredibly chicks out kicking their coverage. Clark Duke, dude, you're Justin Tucker. Okay, come on. Anyone who's a football fan knows that joke, and they'll get that. But anyway, we're moving on to it's on Netflix. Yeah, it's on Netflix. I thought I watched it on Netflix. So yeah, if you want to check out Sex Drive, it's on Netflix. Personally, I think there are better sex comedies out there, but Brian is a full-on supporter of Sex Drive. He's going to say definitely check it out.
There are better ones. I would still always take the first American Pie over this.
Yeah, there's at least 5 other ones I would suggest as well that we've actually talked on the show about, mainly Euro Trip. But anyway, we're going to move on to our stinker pick. We literally just got done watching this before we started to air, so this is really, really fresh in our minds. We are talking about a movie that I said last week I watched in theaters, and it was so dreadfully dull that I forgot about this film, and I forgot about like what happened in this film. So it felt like a first-time watch. We are talking about the failed video game adaptation, Max Payne. Max Payne came out October 17th, 2008. Had a budget of $35 million, had a weekend opening of $17.63 million. It was number one its opening weekend, its only weekend number one, and had a finished box office of $87.06 million, $40.68 million domestic, and $46.37 million international. Yeah, Max Payne. First time watch for Brian, I believe. I think you said you thought you watched it, but then as we were watching,
I was sure I had seen this movie before, but either I did and it was just so dull that I completely forgot everything about it, or I was mistaken because aside from a couple shots that I know were in the trailer, nothing looked familiar. So
I sadly saw this in theaters when it came out in 2008, and this movie sucks so much. And Brian even said halfway through the film, we've watched worse films. Yes, you're right. We have definitely watched worse films. And we have even watched more boring films like Robin Hood than this. But this movie is just so redundant. Like, first off, I've played the Max Payne games. This is not Max Payne. This is not the video game by any means. First off, we also found out that for the second week in a row, our stinker's a video game adaptation. 2, it starts off with narrator. 3, oh god, what was the third part?
well, it starts off with a narrator basically.
The weather.
At the end of the movie.
Yes.
3.
Brian had a real problem. Like how I had a problem with the weather last week with House of the Dead. Brian had a real problem with the weather.
This like took what House of the Dead did and like just decided to up it. Like that's the other thing. So its whole thing is taking place during winter. There's always snow, and first of all, the snow is always blowing up and around. And it's not like blizzard. It's not like winds blowing. It's just the snow is just floating in the air all the time.
It's rising instead of falling.
It's just floating around. Like they're basically got something recirculating it because they don't want to have to make more fake snow or whatever it is. So that's bad enough. Every shot in the movie, it's just floating every direction. Which okay, fine, whatever. But then we're watching one scene and suddenly it's pouring rain on these two guys. And I noticed that I'm like, is it raining now? It was just snowing a second ago.
We're talking about not even like they go down one street and then it's another street and it's raining.
Yeah. Oh, this isn't like a day later or something. This is like,
no, it's like maybe 15, 20 minutes.
Yeah. And then, okay, that was weird for that one scene to have rain. And then there's, I think at least 2 or 3 other times in the movie where like suddenly in one scene it'd be raining, but it's not like this took place like, in spring where there's still some snow and then other times it rains, because the rain would not melt any of the snow that was on the ground, because the next scene it would all be back again. Yeah. And it wasn't like it was like, kind of a slushy rain or anything. It was nothing between. It was just a couple scenes decided, hey, let's have it rain this time instead because it looks better for the scene. And it was just so bizarre. But that just really, it's one of those things that you're not into a movie when you're just so focused on.
You're so focused on everything else. Like the other thing too is I think we're in the third act. I was like, has there been no score through this entire film? Because it was so just dreadfully quiet as Mark Wahlberg's walking down. I'm like, has there not been any sound or music?
There's a scene where he goes to like a club, and the club, like, I think had a little bit of music.
It wasn't a club. It was like a hotel party. Like he goes to this guy's apartment or like hotel room.
That's what it was.
And there's like strobe lights and like the green laser light things. And there's people kind of just walking around, kind of like they're dancing, but there's no music at all.
They had laser lights and everything going, but no music.
I was just like,
very strange.
I don't think there's a score to this film, like at all. But the main, there's a lot of problems with this film. But
I also realized at one point they say Mila Kunis' character's name at like the last half hour, and I'm like, did we even know her name until now?
No, we only knew her last name because of her sister.
Yeah.
But and Mila Kunis is like she's advertised as being like kind of Mark Wahlberg's number 2 through this film. She's in this collectively 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes tops in this film, would you say? You stopwatched it.
Between all her scenes, definitely no more than like 20.
Yeah, she's barely in this film. She looks great. Her scenes aren't bad by any means, but she's definitely misadvertised as being the co-lead of this film. But Mark Wahlberg is probably one of the most frustrating actors to me. Because he can be in some movies that I love, like The Big Hit, The Other Guys. Heck, even though it's a Philadelphia Eagles film, Invincible.
Three Kings, I really love.
Yeah, but then he can go off and put on some of the shittiest performances in both the Transformers films that he's in. This, The Happening, Patriots Day.
What? Huh?
What? No. No. Huh? What? But, and it's like, it's almost like he knows if he's in a shit movie as he's filming it, because you can tell he does not give a shit in this film. And even when he has to try to like actually act in this, he's half-assing the hell out of this, which makes it frustrating. Because
no, what's worse is I think he is trying to act, and that's just as good as he can act. He's supposed to be like all depressed and emotional in a couple scenes, and it was just the most awkward thing.
It's just him stoically. And it's like, I know he's not a shitty actor because we've seen him in things. We're like, wow, Wahlberg was actually really good in this movie. I know he's not a bad actor. So it's frustrating watching him in these movies and just going, dude, why are you so fucking awful in this film? First off, the story is all over the place. There's this drug. It takes until...
Keep in mind before he starts, we had to piece this together on our own because the movie wasn't telling
us. It wasn't until it's an hour 40-minute movie. I think it didn't tell us until what, an hour 15. It finally gave us something to go off of.
Yeah, after the first like half hour, we paused it. We're like, okay, now what's happening? We tried to like piece together what was going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, granted, this is a drug that's in the games. There's this drug called Valkyrie. It's this blue thing. They drink it and they start hallucinating angels. Or Valkyries, basically. But we find out they're Valkyries later because a tattoo guy has to have a Norse fucking god handbook and basically monologue dropped us because I know when I want to go get a tattoo, I go to my tattoo parlor for Norse god information. So thank you.
Which just happens to have that book on top of the counter too.
Exactly, literally on top of the counter. Like, oh, I knew you guys were coming.
But they aren't even seen. It's not like your traditional like you've seen in mythology of Valkyries and they're not really angels. They're like total demon looking things.
Yeah,
black demons, and everyone's completely scared of them. So anyone who's taking the drug, as far as we know at this point in the movie, all these people like seeking out the drug and taking the drug. Not a single person is enjoying it. They're all having bad trips. Why is anyone taking it?
They all effectively die by taking this. So that's the thing that Brian and I were like, why are they taking this drug? Like, do they get an extreme high? Do they feel like
not that we saw
weird, like PCP or stuff like that? Nothing in this film is showing us why people would take this drug. Yeah. Except for maybe they want to see angels, which they're horrified every time they see them, and then they effectively die. So it's like, I can see if they were saying, oh, this is like ecstasy or whatever, which first off, it's in liquid form, so it wouldn't be X. But it's just, it's confusing because we just keep seeing these people like want to take this thing, and we're not seeing or even being explained why this is something people want to take. So it's incredibly frustrating not understanding the reasoning behind the drug. Then you've got, what's his name? The actor that we were talking about, he plays Lupino. What's his name?
He plays Lupino is Amari
Nolasco?
Yeah.
He plays Lupino, who's like the main thug in the film. And he's just kind of out there, like lurking, like Batman, just overwatching everybody. And you don't really get explanations to his character until, once again, start of the third act. You eventually find out what this drug is. Okay, cool. We understand why some people would take it. Random, people on the street, aka females in this film, no
or people just at a party.
Yeah, at a party, just taking it like it's X. There's no reason for them to take this drug.
Yeah. At
all. So the whole basis of this drug makes no sense to the plot of this film. Then you've got Max Payne, the video game character, who's supposed to be this like awesome detective, badass, shoot 'em up, like Mel Gibson, Lethal Weapon style. Does nothing in this film till literally the last like 10 minutes of this movie, he is just dreadfully boring. Just walking around with a bad attitude, trying to find out who murdered his wife and his baby, which, okay, cool. That should give us something. But he doesn't do anything in this film. Wahlberg is just stoically looking uninterested for an hour and 10 minutes in this film, while everyone else is acting around him, trying to give him a semblance of a character. You got Mila Kunis trying. You got Olga, say her last name because I'm going to butcher it.
Kurlenko.
Yeah, you got Beau Bridges. You got Ludacris. You got Donald Luge, who I love, or Logue. They're all trying so hard to make a character out of Mark Wahlberg's Max Payne, and they are failing miserably because Max Payne or Wahlberg's just the whole time. The story or the director gives literally no backstory to anything happening. There's no monologuing. There's no expedition until way late in the film. At this point, you don't fucking care anymore. It feels, and this is where Brian was confused because, like I said, he didn't remember the film. He's like, "Is this like a supernatural film about like how Constantine is?" I go, "No, it's not. It's not supposed to be."
Because when it started out, before we push play, I was asking about it because I remembered, like I said, I remembered some trailer shots in that of like these flying black angel-looking things.
Yeah.
And all that, and this
guy's on fire.
So I assumed it was a Constantine type movie, and he's like, "No, not at all." And he had to explain to me what game was. I'm like, "Who knew?"
Yeah, and even for people who was like, the drug is in the video game, and I even have the film. I was like, I don't remember there being angels in the game. I looked it up. There are no Valkyrie angels or anything like that in the games or the graphic novel. This was literally a choice by the studio and the director to throw this into the movie that has nothing to do with the video game. Does it work? Hell no. You know why they threw it into the game or into the movie? Because the movie is dull as shit, and they were trying to grab some semblance to make people want to see this film. So let's throw Valkyrie angels in there because, like Bryce said, it looks like Constantine, which, granted, Constantine didn't do great in the box office, but people went and saw it.
But it was a good movie.
People went and saw it because it's fucking Keanu Reeves. This movie, this movie is frustrating as hell because, granted, it's not going to be the best movie you ever seen, but literally, if they just took the time to put the building blocks in of a basic film to explain the narrative and what's going on in this world, it probably wouldn't be that bad of a film. But it's so lazily written, lazily acted by their lead, and just put together so piss-poss bullshit that it's horrible.
Everything you just said makes complete sense in light of what I realized after I watched it. The director of this movie also assembled a cast who just lazily walked through it, and the piss poor story, even though they had all the building blocks. This guy directed A Good Day to Die Hard, the Die Hard movie that a Die Hard huge fan, pretends doesn't exist.
Let's put it this way. I tried to watch that movie. I stopped 15 minutes into it and go, nope, not watching this.
I wanted to stop 15 minutes.
I still, to this day, have not seen past the 15-minute mark.
The first time I saw A Good Day to Die Hard, I had gone to the theater for a marathon event where you watched 1, 2, 3, 4, and then they were going to show the new one. And so not only am I seeing this shitty movie, but I'm seeing it back to back compared with the good ones. And so I'm just like, that movie was shit. And so when I saw that he directed this, I'm like, oh, I'm not surprised he can take decent actors and a decent property apparently with the video game and all these things and just turn it into shit.
It's the thing too, is like, well, yes, Max Payne's is a decent video game franchise. I would never have said, let's make a Max Payne movie. It's not. I would never have made a Max Payne movie.
This also felt like, I think this is just one of those things that the trends at the time, because I think I said at the beginning of this movie that, well, after we were about 10 minutes in, I'm like, this feels like the kind of those mid-2000s video game movies that they started pumping out, where like the entire movie just felt like video game cutscenes. And the problem is video game cutscenes are usually pretty damn boring. So it's like, ugh.
Yeah, it's one of those movies. It's just poorly done. Could it have been better? Absolutely. Would it have been a fantastic film? Fuck no. But they literally could have done 20% more work and have actually maybe put out a decent film. And it made decent money. And they tried to set up sequels, but you know what? No one gave a shit.
It
I'm
had
sorry.
a post-credit sequence that Sean didn't even know existed.
I saw it. And I didn't.
Well, because this came out, I was pointing out to him, this came out 5 months after Iron Man, which Iron Man kind of had like the the big kind of kicked off the new resurgence of after credit scenes. And before that, after credit scenes were always just fun little tags like Ferris Bueller, or I think one of the
Masters of the
weapon movies did it,
Universe.
something like that. But like Iron Man kind of kicked off like, hey, at the end of the credits, there's gonna be something important to set up the future. And so they tried to do that here clearly, and it's like, no, you're not getting a sequel.
Even then, like, it's not even a real good scene. Like, he just walks in and sits down, and she hands him a
It's
newspaper.
basically saying, look, this character is still out there. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. Like, it's clearly it was something like, hey, Mila, Mark, you guys come in and shoot this real quick. It's literally gonna take no time at all.
Which I got to point out, at the end of that movie ends so abruptly. First of all,
Oh
like,
yeah, you were like,
and I was like, what happened to Mila Kunis's character? Last we saw, she was just stepping into an elevator, and like, I guess she just left in the middle of this battle and stuff. I'm like,
well, that's the thing too, is that like at the end of the film, like we're not even gonna get on to the point that Max Payne's character should have died at the end of the film because
which we totally called exactly what's going to happen. For like 20 minutes earlier. Yeah.
His character should have died well before the ends of the ending events of the film. Yeah. But he's just sitting there like, we found Max Payne. He's alive. The screen goes dark, which we've come to know. Okay, this is just a transition to probably the end of the film to, a final scene or two. And we're just sitting there. And I think it was like about 5-7 seconds of black screen. We're like,
I was like, and I actually said, was that the actual end?
And then directed. But I was like, what? That was the actual end? There's no end point to this film. He just kills the main bad guy. The end. And it's just like, you could have like had him die peacefully, going off to his wife and kid or whatever. Now, granted, like I said, they have an end credit scene, but it's like no dialogue. It's just he walks into a bar, he sits down next to Mila Kunis, she shows him a newspaper, and then it's over. Like, that's not an ending to a film. I knew this was going to be bad when we went back to rewatch it, but this movie was just frustrating. Like, we're watching it going, oh my God, there's so much movie left, and this movie is not telling us anything.
And we always talk about there's different kinds of stinkers on this show, and this is not an awful movie. It's not offensively horrible to watch. It's just dull and frustrating.
Yeah, and it's one of those where it's like, don't watch it. It's not worth the watch.
But if you want to, it's on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, yay for that. But this is one of those things that further just proves that, like, it's so hard to root for Mark Wahlberg. It really is. Like, I still haven't forgiven him for Patriots Day, but it's really hard to root for him when
he's so hit and miss me. He's one of those actors who I will never have faith in a project based on him being in it. Yeah. With him, it's like I have to see every movie first to decide, because it's like, for all I know, this is another one of your horrible ones.
Yeah, he's like Johnny Depp. You can't, like, oh, Johnny Depp's got a new movie coming out. Cool. It looks intriguing, but I can't trust it because Johnny Depp makes some real stinkers, and Wahlberg's right up there with him.
Yeah.
Moving on to our revisited film. Finally, something light, something levity. Which, granted, we did just talk about Sex Drive, but this movie, I feel like we're gonna have a lot of fun talking about this movie. This is definitely a movie that I think probably could have still got made today, but would have pissed off a lot of people. Well,
there's definitely some things in here.
South Park is still a thing, so they could have probably still made this. That wasn't a tip off of it. Now we were talking about the 2004 action comedy puppet film, Team America: World Police. Team America: World Police came out October 15th, 2004, had a budget of $32 million, had a weekend opening of $12.12 million. It was number 3 its opening weekend, had a finished box office of $50.82 million, $32.78 million domestic, $18.04 million international. Now, granted, if you're not a fan of South Park, which I am a huge fan of, I've watched it since day one, and I'm still watching it to this day, this is not the movie for you by a long shot. If you're a fan of South Park, you probably have seen Team America: World Police already. This is definitely an offensive film, but damn, is it funny. I believe also Oscar nominated. Isn't it Oscar nominated? I'm pretty sure the song got nominated. No, it didn't. I was so I was so sure that the song got nominated, but it didn't. People's Choice Awards, it did for animated film, which I don't classify this as animated, but anyway. Team America: World Police. Obviously, it's Matt Stone and Trey Parker basically playing with puppets, doing voices. It is unabashedly hilarious, but offensive as hell. That you basically have Kim Jong-il basically being Eric Cartman in this film. I mean, if you've watched South Park, he's basically Cartman. It's funny. I find it funny. It's the songs are hilarious. That's one thing that Matt Stone and Trey Parker have always been great at is songs. Obviously, when everyone says, I find it, if I was in a room of people and I said, who here's seen Team America: World Police? I guarantee you 5 to 10 of them go, America, fuck yeah, because you have to do it. It's a part of it. Whether it's that or I'm So Ronry or Montage or the Freedom song.
Freedom isn't free.
Freedom isn't free.
It costs $1.05, just saying.
Yeah, they're so good at making songs for this. Not to mention the incredibly hilarious puppet sex scene, which is just hilarious. Anyone who's offended by the puppet sex scene literally has no sense of humor because it is just funny as hell. It's two puppets. Like, let's be real here. They're literally doing every sex position possible, and it's hilarious to watch. You knew within the first scene of the film what movie you were going into when literally the I'm gonna say Taliban. Would you call them the Taliban? The terrorists in the beginning of the film?
A Taliban-like group.
Yeah, Taliban-like going durka durka durka, and it's like
jihad.
It just says gibberish, and it's like, okay. But what I always love is when Team America shows up and they destroy everything, and like, guys, we saved the day, congrats, and they just go to the people, and the people are all like, I just love the faces. Brian, what are your thoughts on Team America: World Police?
So yeah, I mean, well, the thing is, obviously, I loved South Park and Matt Stone and Trey Parker, and pretty much anything they do, I really enjoy. The story behind this, because you like when I bring this stuff up. Apparently, these guys, Trey and Matt, got a hold of the script for The Day After Tomorrow, and thought it was so ridiculous that what they wanted to do was make a shot-for-shot remake of that with puppets, and release it like the week after The Day After Tomorrow. Of course, their lawyers said, no, you can't do that. And so they just decided to come up with some other story, and because they really wanted to do something in this puppet style. Now, the whole puppet thing, I will say, you can't just automatically be like, hey, let's take puppets and make them swear and do dirty things, and it doesn't automatically make it funny. I mean, you got like Happy Time Murder shows, that doesn't work.
Well, Crank Yankers, that it did work for Crank Yankers, but
a little bit. But I mean, without it being actual good, funny script and stuff, it wouldn't work. Because I mean, honestly, when I watched this, I just rewatched this today finally. The actual use of the marionette puppets gets old pretty fast. Like after the first scene, you're just kind of like, okay, this is kind of silly watching the whole movie done with puppets. Until the sex scene and the vomit scene. It's so much fun.
One of my favorite scenes, and they do it twice, but it's in the first scene where literally you got I can't remember the characters' names, so I'm not gonna try to remember them. But you got extra badass Team American guy, the one who's always got a problem with the actor dude,
Mm-hmm.
and you got the other dude, and they're facing off, and they're like, Capral, and you're like, oh, we're about to have an epic fight scene, and then you just go.
Yeah, when they fight like that. Yeah.
they just cling like this together. Like you expect, like, oh, this is gonna be an awesome puppet fight scene. It's just
there's that, and like I said, and like the sex scene is hilarious. And honestly, if you have not seen the unrated version, the extended version, the sex scene, there's so much more to it.
So yeah, it goes so much further.
Let's just say there's some scatological stuff in there, among other things. But you should check that out.
Also,
but stuff like that is the stuff.
Second film we're talking about today that had a scene like that, because Sex Drive had a scene like that too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
But so I mean, scenes like that, which really took advantage of just seeing puppets do that was extra funny. I mean, they have a sex scene. A sex scene is not going to be funny, but seeing it done with puppets, I was laughing, literally laughing out loud, which I don't do a whole lot when I'm watching movies alone. I do remember when I saw this in the theater, that scene, and for some reason, especially the vomit scene, because it just goes on and on and on. I was laughing so hard I was crying at that scene in the theater. The first, and this is a seeing it for the first time. It doesn't have quite the same impact this, when you rewatch it later. But that was just so funny to me. But the songs I think are still super funny. But most importantly, the writing I think is really good. I mean, like I said, if the comedy's not there, it's not going to work. But I think it's smart. I think it's like South Park. It's good commentary. I mean, they have a whole speech about dicks, pussies, and
I was
assholes.
going to bring that up. That is such a great speech.
And it totally makes sense. I'm like, I get this. What they're saying is
makes
true.
sense. It's a great speech.
It's a great speech.
Fantastic.
But that's the kind of intelligent satire that these guys do, and people just don't give them credit because they think that there's dirty words and cartoons and puppets. Yeah. But it is more than that. Do I think this would get made today? No.
I think if they did, it would have to be toned down considerably.
Well, that's it.
America the Motion Picture is America the Motion Picture is relatively the same thing.
That's what I was going to say. If it got made, it would not be released to theaters. Probably. Because it'd be too risky. Because I mean, just when you were talking about Ronri or Jihad, Durka, people would lose their minds over the racism involved in just those kind of things. Yeah, not to mention everything else. Not to mention everything else. But I think it's hilarious. I think it's a good commentary and satire on current events and politics, and it's just damn funny.
And to this day, I still, anytime someone brings up Matt Damon, my brain goes, Matt Damon. And he hates that so much, and that's what makes it that much greater.
That's why it is one of those things that Matt Damon, anytime you say Matt Damon, somebody's going to do that. And also people like to say, Eric Baldwin.
You can't have that.
But I would also like to point out one thing that I loved when this first came out, I heard this, and I'm just love the fact they did this. The cinematographer on this movie is like a real cinematographer, like an award nominated. I think he actually won Oscars. His name is Bill Pope. He's the same cinematographer who did like the Matrix movies, some of the Spider-Man movies, Scott Pilgrim versus the World. He's Shang-Chi. It looks like he just did that one recently. I mean, they got, instead of, even though they're just puppets, they had like a real guy composing the shots and the action and
it looks great.
The lighting and stuff. And so it looks cool. Yeah.
It looks great. And like I said, and then throwing in because that's one of the things that Trey Stone and Matt Parker, like to do, or Trey, I totally mixed up their names, Trey Parker, Matt Stone, is they love to poke fun at celebrities, and you have like a huge assortment of all of them. Mainly Matt Damon takes the biggest punch out of that, which is why it's so great. But I love
just a quick aside. Apparently, what happened with that is they made all the puppets, and they looked at that one and said that this is their words. They said that one looks like he's retarded, and so they said, "Okay, well, let's have him say just Matt Damon." That's how that came about.
And that totally tracks. And what I was having fun with while watching this was I was trying to figure out what actors would be the Team America. Like Sarah's clearly Lucy Liu. And I was trying to figure out like who Lisa would be and the others. And I had them in my brain. Ben Stiller was the hard ass. Like you give him like the spiked up hair. That's basically Ben Stiller. I can't remember who I had for the other ones. But what I also loved about this, in terms of how it was shot, like just the extra comedy of it, is like Kim Jong-un, like he's got a shark tank, and it's those little like fish sharks that you can buy. Like they're not like actual sharks, they're actual fish sharks. And like when they release the Panthers, it's just black cats. And then granted it goes a little too long because it's all during the Freedom Isn't Free song. Clearly they couldn't shoot in Washington, D.C., like with a big film crew, like shooting the shots. So they just did like home video shots of the puppet just standing
set the puppet up and
just standing next to the monuments, which like I was like, I commend them for at least doing that, because that's what just made it funnier to me, is like clearly that they were not allowed to do that, so they just stick a random puppet there trying to look all sad and like thinking deeply about freedom and shit. I was like, that's the beauty of Matt Stone and Trey Parker's comedy. And like I said, if you don't like South Park's humor, then no, this is going to be fucking stupid to you. And you're
and you'll be offended by it. I mean, you got guys blowing other guys to show their dedication. I mean, come on, puppets by.
Exactly. And you find out, dicks, pussies, and assholes are basically the way the world works. And if you guys have never heard that speech, you need to hear the speech. Like, just look up the speech on YouTube, because first off, it's on Netflix. Watch it. But
It's on Netflix, yeah.
it's a great speech. You need to hear instead of reading it, because it's so good. But yeah, it's on Netflix. Like I said, if you're a fan of South Park and you haven't seen it in a while, or if you maybe became a fan of South Park later in its runtime, because it's like in like its 21st, 22nd season or something like that, and you maybe never saw Team America, go back and check it out, because it is a fun, unique film, because the marionette puppets thing. I mean, not a lot of movies have done that, if any that I think of that did like a full-on film of that. But definitely worth checking out. Going to our feature film, this is a film that Brian and I, once again, it's one of those weird things where this is why we're co-hosts, because this is not a movie that I think a lot of people like, but for some reason, like, you and I both prefer this over the original.
Oh, it's not even close.
Oh yeah, not even close. And like I remember we were going through this. This is one of those. Like, we said this many times on the show before. When we're going through our list, and we're like, okay, I know what I want to be the feature is. I know what I want to be the feature is. Like, all right, say it on 3, go. And we both say the same. We're like, yes, this kind of thing. And this was one of those movies. We're talking about the horror reboot, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003 came out October 17th, 2003. Had a budget of $9.5 million, had a weekend opening of $29.1 million. It was number one its opening weekend, its only week at the number one spot, and a finished box office of $107.36 million, $80.57 million domestic, and $26.79 million international. Yeah, I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an iconic horror franchise. I think it has a decent first film. I've never been a real fan of it. I've never been a fan of the spin-offs, or not the spin-offs, but the sequels, even with Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger and everyone else they've thrown at it. But when this one got a trailer, and I saw the trailer for this one, you have Jessica Biel, who you and I both adore, and you have Jonathan Tucker, who you and I both adore as an actor, and Eric Balfour, and Arleigh Ermey, and all these people that we like, and then you see this trailer, and you're just like, this feels special. Like, this
First
feels.
of all, that was one of the best trailers I had seen in years.
Oh, hell yes!
That trailer with that Polaroid sound, whatever it was.
Yes!
Oh, that was a great trailer.
So good. And then how it starts, with like, it feels like a real life true crime thing, and they treat it with the respect of it being a true story. We know, like, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre technically is based on true events. There is no real Leatherface, but the family is more true story. But they treat it like a true story. And then in the span of 7 minutes, they do such a good job of telling the story of these 5-6 people in their van. I know each one of these characters. I like each and every one of these characters. They did such a great job of framing these characters in that 5 to 7 minute opener before all hell breaks loose, that you cared about these characters, which a lot of horror films don't do, which we talked about this last week with The Final Girls. You cared about these characters because they did such a great job of establishing them before you even got to the hitchhiker scene, which also is a brutally hard to watch scene. And even just the way they shot it with the camera shot, like, I'm sure you'll go a little more into it. It's so good. It's so good. But go ahead, go with a little bit on Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah, so I mean, I was not a fan of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I don't think it's that good of a movie. It's there are people that like it, and more power to them. But it to me didn't do much of anything for me. I don't even think I ever saw 2. Or
I saw the Matthew McConaughey, Renee Zellweger one. I think I saw the other ones, but I don't remember them.
Yeah, that was the third one. That was Texas Chainsaw: The Next Generation, which that's something that they put their faces on the box later on. They were not known actors at the time.
They weren't. No.
Movie. This is like before, right before they kind of broke out and became stars. But so they rebooted with this one. I went in with, well, I was going to say I went in no expectations again, but that's not true because I saw the trailer and the trailer was phenomenal. So I'm like, maybe I'll like this one. And I went and watched this one. And from the very opening, visually, this movie is beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, they with the cinematography and just the way it's shot and lit and everything, it creates this very cool aesthetic to it. It's a creepy environment to it. I love the fact they set it in the 1970s because it kind of gives it that same aesthetic, but also they don't have to deal with like, the kids all having cell phones and things like this in connection to the outside world. They
I
can,
mean, they're literally going to a Leonard Skinner concert.
yeah, go to Leonard Skinner concert in like Dallas or something. But I mean, the movie is beautifully shot. Not even just for a horror movie, for any movie. I think that this movie is really well done. It looks really good. Like you said, it establishes the characters very well, and you care about them. So on a character level, it works. The action scenes I think are extremely well done. The horror. Now, I will say in the very last act, it gets a little bit repetitive. You kind of like the end kind of keeps going.
Well, I mean, what can you do when you have a
But
big guy with a chainsaw chasing a girl? You can
yeah, it's you down to your final girl and know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But there wasn't anything about this movie that I didn't like. And actually, rewatching now, I realized I think I like even more now than I did then, if that's possible.
I appreciate it more now.
And looking at other people's ratings, like my friends on Letterboxd, it actually it skews positive. So I think more people of the ones who've actually watched this movie, I think a lot of people do respect this movie, not as much as maybe like Sean and I. But I think it gets shit on because people just assume, like every other horror reboot, they're like, oh, we don't like the originals, we don't want reboots. But in this case, not only was it as good, I think it's better.
100% agree.
Jessica Biel looks amazing. She has never looked better than this movie. Oh my god. And I shouldn't say it. She does a very good job acting as well.
She looks great in everything.
Just saying, she looks
real here.
Jonathan Tucker, like you said, we both like, which is funny because right before this, I watched another movie, not knowing he was in it. Like apparently when he was like a little kid, I was like, wait, is that Jonathan Tucker?
What movie?
I don't know. He just had a bit part in it. It was a Bruce Willis movie. I want to say like Mercury Rising or something.
It's funny because he was also on Hostage.
Yeah. So, but I watched something else, and then I watched him this. I'm like, hey.
Real quick on Jonathan Tucker, because I know you're going to go into the next person. Dude does a phenomenal with his quiver. His quiver acting in this film is top notch. He works that bottom lip like a fucking.
He plays terrified so well.
Oh,
like
there's
an actor you've all seen, but you might not know who he is. His name is Leland Orser. You know who he is?
Leland.
He was in Alien Resurrection. He was in Seven. He was the guy who was forced to like do the prostitute with the serrated thing. He was on ER for a while. He's been in a ton of stuff. You see a picture, you know this guy. But
what are you talking about in this? I'm trying to find him.
He's not in this movie.
Oh, I think you're talking about this movie.
No, I was making a comparison. This guy named Leland Orser. He plays like terrified super well in every movie he's ever been in, and I assume John Tucker's kind of the younger version of that, where he just plays that so well. Mike Vogel, who we were just talking about, I believe he was in Cloverfield. But the main star of this movie for me, as far as performance, Arleigh Ermey, who he's always played drill sergeants and people like this. This is a movie where he gets to really play like a sleazy villain, and this sleazy. He does such a good job in this movie.
I feel like he's more the villain than Leatherface is.
Yeah, because Leatherface, they kind of, and even in the dialogue, they kind of portray him off as like he's like this, essentially a big dumb kid who's just, this is the way he's been raised.
He's a weapon.
Arleigh Ermey is actually a sadistic bastard,
Yeah.
And he does a great job of that. So I mean, this is a movie that it deserves so much more credit than he gets.
Yeah, like, and you can tell, because I remember watching this in practically a sold out theater the weekend it came out. You can tell how well they. What's that?
Which I just want to say for the record, this made less money than Paranormal Activity. Ugh. Anyway, go on.
You didn't need to do that last day. Anyway, it's the reason why I can tell how well the established characters were is because they established in the beginning that Jessica Biel's, what's her character name, Erin, is expecting Kemp, who they've been together for 3 years. She's been waiting for a ring on this pretty little finger, like the way she words that. And then when he inevitably gets taken out and they find the ring on him, the entire audience, or at least the girls, and I just went, ah. Like, that right there shows you that they did a fantastic job framing these characters, making you care about these characters. That you had a character with Kemp, or Kemper, who you spent maybe the first 30 minutes with, but frankly, he's working around Beale and everyone else, that you show something that was one line in the beginning of the film that was, you could have just, kind of, not paid attention to it and put it back in later in the film, and it held weight to the audience in the movie watching it. Because even as I was watching, like, damn it, he was going to propose to her. Kind of that thing. Frankly, another thing, I don't think it ever got touched on in the film, I actually think Erin was pregnant during the movie. I really do. Because they kept talking about how she wouldn't drink any alcohol. She wouldn't smoke. And she was really focused on wanting to kind of get engaged and stuff like that. I think Jessica Biel's character was actually pregnant in the film, especially also when she takes the baby.
I think you might be reading into that. I think that just might be establishing her as the final girl, because the final girls don't drink and smoke. And
it was just one of those things where it's like the way they were framing certain things, the way they were saying certain things. I was expecting a pregnancy thing to come up, but obviously we get jumped right into everything with the hitchhiker. Which one I thought you were gonna bring that up, but you didn't. The hitchhiker scene. That whole scene is so like once like I said, Paranormal Activity, edge of your seat, like what the hell is gonna happen? And then when she pulls out the gun from where and shoots herself, which it's in the trailer, so I'm not spoiling anything. The camera shot of you seeing everyone freak out, and then it zooms in through the mouth hole, and then the head falls back. Beautiful, like I said, cinematography. Just the idea of we're gonna shoot it like this and go through there. And then the scene with her and Mike Vogel downstairs in the basement. Oh, harsh. Like sad, harsh, like brutal. Because once again, that character, he could have been like the asshole jock character in the film. No, they treat all these guys with respect. So when they do inevitably die, you're like, damn it. It's like, and when you have that scene with them, and it's such a sad scene, especially for the Aaron character. It's like I said, you care. And then you have the little kid, like kid Hewitt,
kid, yeah.
Which, they kind of gave up on that character after the initial, like, helping them out. Kind of would have seemed like they've seen an end point with that. But, it's just, there's so much good here. And one other thing that I really liked about the film, too, to kind of sell the fact that Leatherface in this, or, Tom or Thomas, whatever you want to call Leatherface's real name in the film, is more not like an unstoppable force like Michael Myers or Freddy or Jason, is at the end when he gets injured by Aaron.
I love that part.
And he stays down. Like he tries to get back up like a Michael Myers, and he's just like, no, like I'm hurt. And he stays down. It's like, oh, Aaron's gonna get away. And then it ties back to the beginning.
Oh, I love that callback to the scene with her versus the hitchhiker.
And did you know, it's like, well, it's not going to be him because he's down, because they treat him realistic in the film. Like he's a real human. He's a big ogre mofo, but he stays down for the count in that, which added to the realism of it. It didn't do that over the top, Mike Myers thing where, oh, you stab him or whatever, and he's going to come right back around the corner and stuff. It felt real. And thus the end of the film, where they continued with the crime, the true crime thing, and they ended it like, this is the only footage we've ever had of Thomas Hewitt. He still remains at large, leaving it open like it's a real true story. Everything they did in this film, I think, works. The frame rate, the framework of the characters, whether it be the Hewitt family or whether it be our group of kids, everything works. The brutality of the horror, just the way that the town that they're in, everything, and
the whole production design, whether they're in the gas station or whether they're in the house, just the things that are out on the counter, just it creates a whole atmosphere.
It's so damn good, and I'm surprised that why don't people? This is a on Rotten Tomatoes. Like it's 58, granted, it's like right there, but I was just like, do you guys not pay attention? This is a fantastic horror film. Like, I think this is better than the most recent Halloween. No, I'm not saying Halloween Kills because that's not out yet, or it comes out today technically. But I'm talking about like 2018's Halloween. This is better than that. It's better than the Freddy remake. I put it on par with the Friday the 13th remake because I actually like the Friday the 13th remake. But this one, now granted, they try to do other ones after this. They did New Beginning with Jordana Brewster. I wasn't really a big fan of that one.
You know, I actually did enjoy, not as much as this one, but I thought that was actually solid. I would still put that as like my number 2.
It was
Texas
fine.
Chainsaw.
It was fine, but
And
no,
there's a
it's not
later
as
one,
good as this.
Texas Chainsaw 3D, which
I
enjoyed.
never saw that one.
As a schlocky 3D horror movie, I thought it was. I actually really very much enjoyed it. Now, where they went with parts of the story were kind of like, whatever. But and then I never saw any ones after that. Like came out with one called Leatherface and some other stuff, but I never saw those.
What's funny is that they didn't hit the cannibalism thing in this one, like they do in the other ones.
Yeah, I know.
They never went down that path. Like I think they started to tease it with like, I think she wants to stay for supper, and like I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna get down that path. But for some reason they didn't go with that. Like honestly, like these kinds of horror films, I'm not necessarily a fan of because they just make me uncomfortable. Like the Hills Have Eyes remake. There's one particular scene which it's I guess for most people it's the scene in the trailer, which everyone I think knows that scene. I can't watch that movie. That scene just really made me uncomfortable. I didn't like the way it was shot. It didn't make me feel. Granted, it's not supposed to make me feel good, but you know what I mean. Like I watched it, I was like, I have no interest in watching this movie further. I don't want to watch this movie anymore because of just how this made me feel. These Texas Chainsaw movies, they kind of make me feel like that. Not this one. This one is just done so incredibly well. And this one holds a special place in my heart when it comes to horror. And I always I don't know why I forget about it, because whenever Texas Chainsaw Massacre pops up in conversation, whatever, this is the first thing that comes to my head. But when I think about horror in general, I always forget about this. It makes no sense to me.
Well, I think it's because even though it is a franchise, there's really only one that you really love.
Yeah.
So you don't really think of it, as much as like these other big franchises that you. Like I was just looking, and honestly, if I'm going to be honest, I think this is probably my favorite horror movie of the 2000s. I mean, a straight horror movie. I mean, there's like Shaun of the Dead and there's things like that, Zombieland. But I mean, as far as just like not comedy or anything, just straight horror, this might be my favorite of the entire decade.
I would have to look through mine and stuff like that. But yeah, like this movie it's just so damn good. And like you said, rewatching it now, I liked it more. I appreciated it more. And if there are anyone out there, like granted, if you're watching this, you know we've been talking about horror. If you guys have not checked out Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2003, go out of your way to check this one out. Now, granted, we were saying last week, check out Final Girls, like The Final Girls. It's amazing, which we still feel that way. It's, hands down one of my favorite, horror films. This one, obviously drastically different than The Final Girls, but it is such a great horror film, and it's on
It's on Peacock.
Yeah, it's on Peacock.
So you'll have to watch a few ads in it, but it's free.
Yeah,
you don't have to subscribe to anything. Just
exactly, and it's in the first 30 minutes. So like when it gets to the hour mark, it lets you stay. Let's put it this way: when stuff finally starts to happen in the film, it does not stop and go to ads. So that's one thing I like about Peacock is that there's ads, but they make sure to get them out of the way so you can get into the actual film itself. So it's on Peacock. Check it out. You will not be disappointed if you're a fan of horror, because 2003's Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, in Brian and I's opinion, the best Texas Chainsaw Massacre film, hands down. But yeah, that is our episode, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Weekend Crusaders. If you did, go and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel. We just passed 200 subscribers. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but you know what? We're still just starting out here. I've been doing this channel for almost 3 years now. Brian, you've been a part of the channel for 10 months. We've got way more stuff planned, way more shows, way more of us talking about movies, which we like to do. We hope you guys continue watching these shows and spread the word. If you have friends that like to talk about movies or like to listen to people talk about movies and who love movies and appreciate movies like we do. Granted, there are some movies that we hate, and we're very passionate about the movies that we hate, but we're very passionate about the movies we love. Tell them to check out the channel. Go from there. But thank you all for being subscribers so far, and we hope you guys continue to stay that way. Coming up next, like I said, Halloween Kills, that is released on Peacock today as well. So there'll be a review out for that. And then also The Last Duel. There'll be a review for that as well. So check out reviews for those. Next week, one of the most anticipated films of the year that I know Brian is not necessarily excited for. I'm indifferent. I want to see it just because of the cast. I
do love most of the cast. Yes.
Yeah, I had no prior knowledge. I never saw the original, so I just want to see it because of what it is. Dune will be out. Brian will see it in theaters. I'll probably watch it on HBO Max because I got a 4K TV. There will definitely be a review for that. The French Dispatch comes out. Brian and I probably both will not be watching that one because we really don't care about Wes Anderson films.
I might. Well, here's the thing: is with Wes Anderson movies, like some of them I really like, some of them a lot of times it depends on the cast, and I have not loved any of his movies, but some of them are at least enjoyable. So a movie like that, it comes down to like, is there anything else to see right now that I haven't already seen? No, sure, I'll check that out.
Yeah, unless it like becomes like a Best Picture nominee around Oscar season, there's really not a real rush for me to try to check this movie out. Disney's got Ron's Gone Wrong, which kind of looks like a Big Hero 6 knockoff, but without the superhero aspects of it. I don't see myself checking that out unless I hear like these glowing reviews for it. But that's what comes out next week. And of course, Brian and I will be back again next week with 5 more movies to talk about on the Weekend Crusaders. We've got an all-time classic action film from the 80s. It is the 80s, right? Yeah, it's the 80s.
Yeah.
We got a, I would say rom-com. Well, I say rom-com, or is it like a comedy drama?
It's a comedy. Probably more of a comedy drama.
Yeah, dramedy. That I personally like, but I have not watched it probably in 15 years, so it'll feel like a first-time watch for me. We've got a stinker horror film that I've never seen, but I heard the sequel is actually really, really good. Sadly, we are not watching that sequel. We were watching the first one. We've got another action horror type film that Brian swears is way better than than a lot of people give it credit for. It'll be a first time watch for me. And then we've got an actual rom-com that I personally enjoy and was a favorite of mine watching while I was growing up in the I think 90s, or was it early 2000s? Right around there, late 90s, early 2000s.
I want to say late 90s.
Yeah, I think it was late 90s as well. So figure out what those movies are, and we'll be back next week. My name's Sean Wasserkrug. That's Brian Michaels. We are the Weekend Crusaders. And until next time, in case we don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.